Hello and good morning, everyone. Pleasure to welcome you all for today's Eminent Scientist lecture on behalf of my director, Dr. G. Narahari Sastry, Director CSI IITR Lucknow, Professor Alok Dhawan, and the entire SRTP team here at CSIR NIST. It is a pleasure to welcome you all again, and our special welcome to Dr. I. Surya Narayana, our eminent speaker for today. Although Sir is a former chief scientist who retired from CSIR IICT Hyderabad, he actually started his career from this institute, that is CSIR NIST, where he served for nearly 23 years, which I must mention has been very crucial years for the institute to bring to its present state. And as it is always fascinating to listen to you, sir. So we look forward to your lecture today. So with these few words, I welcome you all once again. Thank you for joining with us for today's lecture. And before I request my colleague, Dr. Sapnali Hazarika, to introduce our speaker, I request Professor Alok Dhawan to please say a few words. Sir, please.
Yeah, thank you very much and namaskar. Welcome once again all the students and mentors who are on this live telecast. I must mention that this CSIR SRTP program, as you all are aware, is a summer research training program. And I think the CSIR stood up to the occasion of the fact that the students were not able to go to the various institutions where they generally go for their summer training. And Dr. Shastri took this challenge. He brought about a portal on the 1st of June, and within 8 days, we had about 16,000 students and mentors who got registered on this portal. I think CSIR, in fact, this country has faced a very trying time in terms of COVID, and we have actually innovated ourselves, and this is the first time in the country that we are having this kind of program where we are getting scientists to talk to students, and also students are having mentors online and they are trying to mentor these students in various areas or specialities. I think it is our fortune that we have Dr. Surya Narayana with us. He not only served at NIST Jorhat, but has also been at IICT. Both of them are premier institutions, and I'm very happy that he could take out time to share his experiences with these students, and I'm sure students will be blessed to have his words of wisdom. So thank you very much, Dr. Surya Narayana, and I now request our colleagues to kindly give an introduction for Dr. Surya Narayana to the students. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind words. I now request Dr. Sapnali to please introduce our speaker for the benefit of our young participants. So, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you, respected Director, CSIR NIST Dr. G. Narahari Sastry, for giving me this opportunity to introduce such an eminent personality, Dr. I. Surya Narayana. Dr. I. Surya Narayana retired as a scientist, chief scientist from CSIR IICT Hyderabad. He has formerly worked in CSIR NIST Jorhat. He was also visiting fellow in the Department of Sanskrit Studies, University of Hyderabad. In other words, he is a Sanskrit Pandit. Dr. I. Surya Narayana has dedicated his works in the field of computer chemistry, analytical chemistry, spectroscopy, nanomaterials, and catalysts. He holds 3 patents on improved process for the manufacture of microcrystalline wax, process for in situ synthesis of supported heteropolyacids and salts thereof, and an improved low palladium containing catalyst for the selective hydrodeschlorination of chloroaromatic compounds. Dr. I. Surya Narayana has written several books and research articles. One of his major contributions is in making knowledge in terms of science and technology available and understandable for common people, especially in Telugu language. He has also contributed to All India Radio Hyderabad by providing 10 articles on various scientific topics and to Chemistry Encyclopedia of Telugu University. Dr. I. Surya Narayana has done his postdoctoral under CSIR DAD Exchange Fellowship in Technical University, Munich, Germany.
He was an international fellow under Brainpool Fellowship in RCNC KRICT, South Korea. So now on behalf of our director, I invite you, sir, to this special forum to deliver your lecture. We are thankful to you for spending your time here and to mentor us in this institute. So thank you, sir. Over to sir.
Thank you, Praswapnali. Before I start, I invoke Ma Bharati in the form of Goddess Saraswati. Amba Navambujajwala Karambuja Charada Chandra Chandrikadambara Charumurti Prakatasputa Bhushana Ratna Rochira Chumbita Dikvibhaga Sruti Sukta Vivikta Nija Prabhava Bhavambara Vidhi Visruta Viharini Nan Krupachudu Bharati Nan Krupachudu Bharati. I thank Dr. Shastri for providing me this opportunity, and it is a very, very important event at this juncture of pandemonium to link with the students and younger generation. See, people like me who are at the edge of 70 years, we always like to be with the younger generation to transfer whatever the ideas we have to the younger generation. So with these few words, I would like to start my presentation. So the topic of the day is Atmanirbhar Bharat, emerging as Vishwaguru. This title has 7 words, out of which 5 words are from Sanskrit. I would like to elaborate what these words. Atma, it is 2 types. One is Paramatma. The second one is Jivatma. The Atma, the soul, when it attains the form of nature, which is the manifestation of universe, or the creativity, or the creation energy, what we call as a Chaitanya Shakti in the universe, in the nature, is the God or the Paramatma. If it remains within the individual activities, then it becomes Jivatma, that is individual self. Nirbhar means, in Sanskrit actually the word Nirbhar means plenty. So the other way it is, if you are satisfied with what you have, that is depending upon yourself. Bharat is the India. It is having an ancient glory, culture, science and technology. It is all revealed by ancient scriptures supported by archaeological investigations and adopting those principles which are suitable in the present and future. Emerging means taking the lead. Vishwaguru, Vishwa means universe, Guru means teacher. That means you have to become the Vishwaguru. You have to teach for the whole world. What is Bharat? It is the country which had a very great cultural civilization. It was known as Ganga Sindhu civilization, which was as ancient as Greek civilization and Roman civilization. The excavations at Mohenjo-daro and Harappa are the evidences of the civilizations flourished in the antique times. It is the culture that represents Bharat, not the boundaries. At that time, excellent universities at Takshashila, Nalanda and Amaravati existed to imbibe the knowledge in the minds of the young and train in all the areas of knowledge of that time. At that time, Bharat was Vishwaguru. These universities were well-known centers of knowledge, and students from different countries used to come over there and learn. The teachers of those learning centers used to lead a ascetic life and concentrate on the subject they are pursuing. In addition to subject knowledge, they used it to master the art of communication. During Vedic period, human power and nature, these are the only two things available. Whereas at present you have very good systems, computers, paper, printing, all those things. At that time only nature is the motivator. Understanding the principles of nature was the education. And memorization is the best mode of communication. Knowledge passed from generations to generations through memorization. For memorization, verse form is the easiest one. So, knowledge communication, for that, standard method is the verse form. So, different meters in the verse were taken to adopt different situations and subjects. Another thing is discussion between teacher and the taught. Questioning by the student to the teacher, that was given very important place. This was reflected in the Upanishads. Later, human beings started writing on stones as pictures. With the passage of time, leaves were used for writing, and a special class of people known as lekhaks or writers came into existence. The great scientists, saints or knowledgeable persons used to recite, and the writers used to write on leaves of palm, purjara, etc. These writers had good grasping power and writing skills. They used to treat the leaves and make the leaves fit for writing. They wrote with the stylus. In Sanskrit, it is called ghantam, or a metal pen with a sharp edge. They have standardized the language, and that language was known as Sanskrit. No other ancient languages persisted, whereas this only language Sanskrit is, which is alive even now, and a lot of literature is available. Thus, the first epic Ramayana has come in the literary history. This was enunciated by Maharshi Valmiki. Later, Maharshi Vyasa classified Vedic knowledge and divided into Rig, Yajus, Sama, Atharvana Vedas. He also narrated 18 Puranas and then Mahabharata. Subsequently, great poets like Kalidas, Bhavabhuti, Bharavi, Dandi, Makha, etc. produced great kavyas, dramas and other literary works. Later, regional languages developed to suit the local necessities. They may be either Prakrits or dialects or distortions. Bhartruhari, a well-noted Sanskrit poet, produced an excellent work on human life in 300 slokas. That is stanzas known as Bhartruhari Subhashita Trishati. It consists of 3 parts: Niti Sataka, Srungara Sataka and Vairagya Sataka. He described in these 3 parts how one has to build up his life, about the people in the society, how to lead a perfect life. Prarabhyatena khalu vignabhayena nichai. Prarabhyate na khalu vignabhayena nichai. Prarabhya vigna nihata viramanti madhya. Vignair muhur muhurapi pratihanyamanya. Prarabdha muttama guna na parichajanti. Why I am reciting this sloka is, it is a very, very important sloka for the human life. In this sloka, he divides the people into three categories. Nichai, that is the lower people. They are those who do not take up any work, thinking that a lot of obstructions will come during the work. Second category, medium people who start the work but stop in between when obstructions come. Brave and confident people, uttama guna, not only start the work, they try to complete till the end, even if obstructions come and hinder. So, one has to be brave and develop confidence in himself. That is to develop Atmanirbharata in himself and devote for the completion or to see the end of success. Lead a fruitful life. So far, I have discussed the literature part. Ancient Rishis, not only they were great philosophers or literary persons, but they had contributed very well to the science. Because India has been consistently a scientific country right from Vedic to modern times. For them, science is to understand nature. What are the principles of the nature and how they have to use their intelligence for the benefit of the society. That was the motto. Benefit of the society is the ultimate motto of the rishis. Different sciences like astronomy, mathematics, geography, engineering, physics, metallurgy, plant science, and medicine flourished in those days. Achievements in the field of engineering began in prehistoric times, from 3rd millennium BC, that is during Harappan period. Construction of cities and towns called Janapadas developed before 7th century BC itself. Religious edifices like stupas, Chaitya-gruhas, viharas started by Buddhist skilled engineers. Gupta period showed the systematic construction of structural principles of temple architecture. All these things you get in Narada Maharshi's Silpa Shastra and Maya's Shilpa Shastra. They are well-known engineering texts. Here I would like to mention this Narada Maharshi's Shilpa Shastra was translated by one of our CSR laboratories director, Center Structural Engineering Research Center director. He was a former director, Dr. Iyengar, translated into English from Sanskrit to English, and then tried to correlate whatever the things mentioned with the modern civil engineering aspects. Similarly, weapons, tools, and implements made of stone were very coarse and heavy. So metal replaced the stone. Metals played a very important role for different ornaments and enriched the cultural life. The early cultural life of the Vedic period and subsequently is the evidence has come from the archaeological excavations. They were also essential for agricultural implements to improve the professional capabilities. It was an agricultural society, so they needed implements for agriculture. Thus, the metallurgy has become a favorite topic, and the fruits of metallurgy brought fame in the whole world. I would like to tell a little bit detail about this metallurgy in the future, of my work, talk. To keep people, plants, animals healthy, medicine became a necessity. The traditional system of Indian medicine is known as Ayurveda. It is a special branch of knowledge that deals with both the body and the mind. Ayurveda theories and practices were also applied to animal and plant life. There are medical treatises on plant life, Vriksha Ayurveda, horses, Ashwayurveda, elephants, Hastayurveda, and the bovine species, Gavayurveda. So to know about the land and the countries and for doing commercial activity or business, geography or Bhaugolika Shastra was necessary. So the people started learning Bhaugolika Shastra. Mahabharata discusses at length the geography of the world of those days in detail. Mahabharata describes during the Mahabharata war which countries, which armies of the countries participated in the war, Mahabharata war. So all those details you can get from the Mahabharata. Astronomy inspired many ancient rishis because they wanted to understand the time, that is day and night, how the cycle of time, the year, all those things. So they wanted to understand the astronomy, the planetary positions, stars, the visible planets, all those things. But for astronomy, mathematics is the backbone. So it is also important in construction of Yajna-vedikas and daily chorus. That's why what they thought is Yatha Sikham Ayuranam Naganam Manayo Yatha Tadvad Vedanga Shastranam Ganitam Murthanisthitam. This sloka shows that like crest or plumage of the peacock or jumps of snakes, mathematics is the head of all sciences. That is what we are seeing. Now mathematics is required in every branch of science, whether it is a biology or a physics or chemistry or any science, geology or geophysics. Everywhere the mathematics plays a very important role. So what are the contributions of our Indian mathematicians? The numbers, concept of numbers, and zero was given by Indians. Their contributions in arithmetic, algebra, geometry, trigonometry, and calculus are very significant. Arithmetic is known as Anka Ganita, algebra is a Bija Ganita, geometry is Jamiti, trigonometry is Trigonometry. Like that, you have all these subjects, and there are so many treatises written in those days about these mathematics. They are called Siddhantikas. Lagadas Yajusya Jyotisha, Varahamihiras Panchasiddhantika, Vasishtas Vasishta Siddhanta, Aryabhatas Aryabhatiya, Varahamihiras Suri Siddhanta, Brahmaguptas Brahmaspra Siddhanta, Bodhayana Sutras, Shulba Sutras, Bhaskaras, Lilavati. Jain prince like Mahavira and Sripati worked, their works Ganita Sarasangram and Ganita Latika are well-known books in mathematics. Only thing is we have to understand the principles behind those Sanskrit works and then correlate with the modern theories. The discovery of the decimal system, wherein place value notation is a very, very important thing. And this was the contribution of ancient Indians. Hindus, Jains, and Buddhists gave long lists of names for these decimal places. The Vajanisneya, Taittariya, Maitrayani, Kathak Samhitas give denominations up to 13 places. They have given the names. Buddhist literature went up to 54th place and named as Talakshana. Jains called the decimal places Gananasthana and Brahmanic notation to up to 29 places. Aryabhata onwards, the expression Sthana Sthanam Dasagunam Syat, from one place to the next, it is 10 times. Dasagunottaraha Sanyaha, that is after 10, it is the next one. New one 10 times that of the previous. One most important thing in our ancient literature, use of words for the numerals and decimal places. This table shows what type of words they used. For one, they used Sasi, Chandra, Soma, Indu, because it is the only one in the whole universe. For two, Akshi, Chakshu, Karam, Netram, Lochanam, Bahu, Karnam, because it is only two. Only 2 hands, 2 legs, 2 eyes. So that 2 is represented by these body parts. 3 is the 3 puras, 3 lokas, 3 gunas. 4 Chatusagaraha, that is 4 oceans. Abdhi, Brahmasya, that is Chaturmukha, Chaturyuga, Chaturveda. So 4 is represented by these words. Pancha Indriya, Pancha Bhuta, Pancha Gavya, Panchabana. So 5 is represented by those 5. 6 by Shadrutu, Shad Shastra, Shad Rasa, Shad Darsana, Shadanga. 7 Saptadri, Saptasaila, Saptarishi, Saptaturanga, Saptagiri. 8 Astama Digvija, that means Diggaja, 8 elephants that are weighing the earth. 8 Pannagas, 8 Vasu. 9 Navama, Navanandana, Navananda, Navapadartha, Nidhi, Navadidhi, Navagraha, Navarandra. 0 is Akasa. It is full. Come. Ka, Dvi, Divi, Vyoma, Gagana, Vishnupada, like that. Similarly, positions, Eka, Dasa, Sata, Sahasra, Dasa Sahasra, they went up to 53. Because I mentioned these mathematical contributions or principles because they are useful for all other subjects also, other disciplines. The present computer science is again based upon two words, that is yes and no. The entire Boolean algebra talks only 2, 0 and 1. 0 is nil, 1 is yes. Yes and no, yes and no. So the entire structure of computational chemistry, computational science depends on the 0 and 1. We, in our ancient system, we have gone up to 10 to the power 53 in the form of words. Now I discuss with the basic principles of chemistry. Rasayana, it is called, chemistry is known as Rasayana Shastra. And this Rasayana Shastra, you can see from the great works of our ancient rishis in 3 major areas. One is the intellectual thinking about the nature. Second, development of professional skills for livelihood. Third, welfare measures like health care of the society. Vaiseshika Darshana of Kanada propounded the concept of atom and its indivisibility and the law of cause and effect. He says there is no difference between a mustard seed and a mountain basically. That is what exactly I put it in the same sloka. Syat tada meru sarshapayo parimana bhedo na syat. Tasmat niravayam dravyam avadhihi sayyeva paramanuhu. That is what is paramanu, the one which cannot be cut down. That is the without parts. Therefore, any substance without parts must be the limit. And that substance is the ultimate atom. The concept of atom and its indivisibility came only from the Kanada, who is almost 3,000 years old. He also further states that anukas combine to form dvenukas, that is monoatom forms a diatom and diatom forms a triatom, and they further combine to give the matter. And he has already mentioned what are the matters. Pruthivyaapastejo vayurakasam kalo disha atma manaha iti dravyani. Pruthiv, apas, teja, vayu, akasam. Not only this 5, we call it panchabhutas. Kalo, time also is a matter. Disha, direction is also a matter. Atma, soul is also a matter. Mana, mind is also a matter. Because Atma is responsible for the living being. And Manas is the responsible for the actions. So, time, direction, Atma and Manas, these 4 are the important material things. Rupa, rasa, gandha, sparsha, sankhya, prasaktavyam, samyoga, vibhagai, paratva, aparatvai, buddhaya, sukha, dukkhe, ichha, dveshai, prayatrascha, guna. These are the qualities. Rupa, that is form. Rasa, taste. Gandha, smell. Sparsha, touch. Sankhya, number. Pruthakthavyam, some combination. Samyogat, vibhaga, division. Paratva, aparatva, that is buddhi. Sukha, that is happy. Unhappiness, desire. All these things are all the qualities of matter. Utkshepanam, avakshepanam, akunchanam, prasaranam, gamanamiti karnani. These are the slokas given by Kanada in his Vaiseshika Darshana. He also says, Sarpirjatu madhuchisthanam agnisam yogat dravatpamadvihi. Here he gives about the thermodynamics laws. Sarpi, this is ghee. Jatu, lak. Madhuchisthanam, beeswax. When they near the Agni, that is fire, they change into liquids. Dravatmavadbhi, Agni Samyoga, very death. At the combination or the addition of heat, they change into liquids. Otherwise, they are solids. The solids are getting converted into liquids with the addition of delta G, that is heat. Not only the small ones like beeswax and ghee. He says, Trapu, Sisa, Loha, Rajata, Svarnanam, Agnisam Yoga, Dravatpamadbhi Samanyam. Trapu, tin, Sisa, lead, Loha, copper, Rajata, silver, Suvarnanam, gold. All these 5 also, when Agnisam Yoga, when they are melted, or when they are subjected to the heat, they get into Dravatva. So the phase change from solid to liquid is already indicated. It was indicated by Kanada at that time. This is what we call it as a phase change. Then development of professional skills for livelihood. Agricultural required biofertilizers. Housing required building materials. Weaving required natural dyes and fixtures. Artisans required different metallic utilities. So the metals, the ancient Indians, they were no, the Vedic literature itself indicates, Sukla Yajurveda says, Asma chame, Mrittika chame, Girayas chame, Parvatas chame, Sikatascha Sikata means sand. Vanaspatayascha me, Hiranyancha me, that means gold. Ayascha me, iron. Seasancha me, lead. Trapuscha me, already I told you, tin. Syamancha me, that is iron. It is a black, Shyamam was taken for even copper also in those days. Loha is taken as a copper. So Agnischa Mahapascha me, Virudhascha me, Osadayascha me, Krishnabhachancha me. So in Sukla Yajurveda, it is mentioned that these metals were known to the Vedic people. And India's contribution in metallurgy, the copper, gold, iron, zinc and alloys like brass, bronze and Panchaloha, they are all very well known. Chandogya Upanishad mentions that all metals have their special characteristics. It also mentions that gold by salt, silver by gold, tin by silver, lead by tin, lead by metal, metal by wood, and wood by skin can be joined. Yatha samyakena lohamanina sarvam lohamayam vijnatam syat vacharam bhanam vikaro namadheyam lohamityeva. That is what Chandogya Upanishad says. Tadyadha lavanena suvarnam sandadhyata suvarnena rajatam rajatena trapu trapuna sisam sisena loha lohena daru daru charmana. Similarly, in Mahabharata, we have the Pipilika gold, that is nano gold. That actually they could get from the ant hills of in the forests. Especially the tribal people, they brought that gold, nano gold, and said that this is a very superior gold. That is what they mentioned. I have given you the Sanskrit sloka also here. Pipilikaihi Jatarupam Dronameyaha. That means they brought in the lot of big dronas. Dronas are almost like kunsas actually. This whole thing is Kautilya's Arthashastra. He discussed at length about the metallurgy. Akarajyakshaha. That means the person who is in charge of the mines and the ores. He should know Sulbadhatu Shastra Rasapaka Mani Ragajno. He should be a Mani Ragajno. Sakho, his associates also should be Tajjata Karma Karano Sampanna. They have to be very well versed in the working of those things. Kitta, Musha, Angara, Bhasma, Lingam, Vakaram, Bhutapurvam, Abhutapurvam va, Bhumi Prastara, Rasa, Dhatu Matyartha, Varna, Gaurava, Ugra, Gandhara Samparichat. They have to examine the color, the Gandha, that means the smell, and the rasa. Actually, some of the time they taste also, they put it. So these things they have to examine. All those things I'll give you in this thing. So they used to characterize the ore as well as metal based on the color, as well as heaviness to which metal it belongs. The ore from the rocks are a region of the earth which is heavy, unctuous, and soft, tanny, greenish, reddish red, or is the copper ore. Crow black or dove color is the lead ore. Grey one is the iron ore. Not only this, they used to test the gold and silver quality. They estimated the quality of the gold by the yellow color of lotus filaments. The Padma's Kesara, that Kesara's color, it has to match the gold color. Then only, even if a little slight variation of the color to the red means it is an impure one. Similarly, silver and copper, they used to test it by the color of the system. And same thing what we are using atomic absorption spectroscopy, the 360 line for gold. Making of silver and copper coins is discussed in detail. If you are making a silver coin, it should have 11 parts of silver, 4 parts of copper, and 1 part of iron or any other metal. Similarly, if you are making copper coins, 11 parts of copper, 4 parts of silver, and 1 part of the iron or other metal. That is the standard they have mentioned for the coins. Similarly, we know the Indian iron technology. Even now it is visible. The iron pillars, non-corrosive iron pillars present in Delhi. Similarly, Udayagiri near Sanchi, Dhar in Madhya Pradesh, Kadachadri in hills in Karnataka. That iron is the pure iron without any contamination. That's why it is non-corrosive. The same technology we use for the manufacture of huge beams in temples of Odisha, such as Jagannath Puri. The another one is the wood steel, this iron technology. A highly exported material produced in South India in those days, especially from Deccan, to make Damascus swords. These Damascus name did not come from Syria's capital city, but from the wavy pattern characteristics of surface of the swords. This wood steel is primarily iron containing high proportion of carbon. It is a high carbon alloy produced by crucible process. The evidence for the earliest production of metallic zinc is from India only. The criticality of zinc technology is known because of its very critical boiling point. Zinc volatilizes at about the same temperature around 1000 degrees centigrade, which is the same as the smelting temperature of zinc ore. So the technology became very, very difficult in those days. Indians used a downward distillation technology. That is, they used Adhapatana yantra, wherein you have two mud parts, one and the other on over, and the heat is done from the top. So this was a very good technique which they could collect zinc vapor and then condense in a lower container. And that technology became very famous in the whole world. That's why for zinc in Sanskrit is known as Jasadaha, the one which gave fame, Yasha, Jasa, Yash, Da, that is the one which gave famous, which gave the famous, which has given fame to the country. It is mentioned in Rasopanishad, which is a 11th century book. In South India, it is known as Tuttunaga or Tuttanag. Bidriware, a zinc layered metallic work famous in Hyderabad region, was also a very good technology. This was actually supported by Muslim rulers of that region. This Rasopanishad also discusses metallurgy of tin and transmutation of metals. Human thirst for gold and tantric methods of Buddhism led to alchemy. Acharya Nagarjuna, the great alchemist and Buddhist monk, started his school of alchemy near Amravati in a mountain cave called Sri Parvata. Archaeological excavations confirmed the presence of a laboratory in that area. A 14th century classic named Navanatha Charitra by poet Gaurana in Telugu literature, it gives the description of Nagarjuna's laboratory, the people who work in that laboratory. And number of Rasashastra books were published during 11th to 17th centuries. These books discuss the purification, transmutation, and utilization of metals in disease treatments. This area of medicine became Rasashastra and playing an important role in modern Ayurveda therapy. Then third one is the welfare of the society, especially healthcare. Intellectuals of the society tried to identify and use different plants and other materials as medicines for curing diseases and for longevity, which they called as Rasayana. The word Rasayana has been used as a synonym for chemistry in Sanskrit and other Indian languages. We can declassify Ayurveda texts into three categories. One is texts of Samhita period, texts of Rasasastra period, and texts of later period. The three classical texts, Charaka Samhita, Susruta Samhita, and Ashtanga Hridayam, known as Brihatrayi, are the primary texts. Sarangadhara Samhita, Madhava Nidana, and Bhava Prakasha are the secondary texts, which are known as Laghutrayi. Vaishajya Kalpam by Gangadharacharya, Basavarajiyam by Basavarasu, Aushadharatnakaram, and Andhra Vaishajya Ratnavali by Sripada Krishnamurti Sastri are the later period works. The medicinal treatise, Charaka Samhita, discussed 150 types of diseases with further subdivisions. 341 medicinal plants were discussed. Their leaves, their stems, their roots, for what purpose they can be used. A root has to be used for certain diseases. Leaves are to be used for certain diseases. And stem or bark can be used for certain diseases. 177 medicinal substances of animal origin and 64 medical substances from mineral origin are also discussed. He categorized 102 types of pathological conditions and congenital defects, 109 anatomic and 42 physiological terms, and 33 varieties of bones. They also differentiate the cereals and legumes, natural waters, sugarcane derivatives, types of honey, different types of milks and milk products, different vegetable oils, and alcoholic beverages. This classification was mainly on the physical characteristics and their utilities. This Charaka Samhita is not written by a single person. It is proceedings of discussions of different rishis. 6 groups. They discussed at length and then come out certain ideas, and those ideas were compiled and given by Drudabala, named as Charaka Samhita. Similarly, Sushruta, the great surgical specialist of those days, developed a number of surgical instruments for operations of the human body. What is mentioned clearly is, if any part of the body it cannot be rejuvenated, then it has to be removed. That was the basic principle of that. So his methods are practiced even now, and he is known as father of surgery. He developed a number of fermentation products for the anesthesia effects. And Hornelli, in 1856, he has published a beautiful book on Susruta Samhita, giving all the correlating with the modern surgery, modern anatomy and surgery. It's one of the best referred book. Hornelli is a very good doctor of those days. During 8th century, Rasa Shastra promulgated by Siddhanagarjuna made an important mark in the society, and his Rasa Vidya, use of metals, mercury, and converting of lot of metals to gold, has become part of the life for many. With the combination of metals with herbal products, produce different products such as asavas, lekhyas, bhasmas, churnas, gugulus, rasas, vatis, and tailas, and they are used even now for different diseases in Ayurveda. All those number of books came out during this period, that is 8th to 17th century, on Rasashastra. Professor Damodar Joshi of Benares Hindu University, he has written an excellent book on Rasashastra. These are all the books on ancient Indian science. If you see the great old, the grandfather of chemistry in India, Professor P.C. Ray, he wrote in the Hindu chemistry in 1909, who, because of his book, the whole world came to know what are the contributions of Indians in the chemistry. So afterwards, first research by Brajendranath Sil, Vinay Kumar Sarkar, Girija Prasanna Majumdar, and Professor Satya Prakash, B. Subrayappa. They are all such type of people who worked very hardly and then produced a lot of books on the ancient Indian science. The basic concept of, now I want to discuss a little bit in detail about the Ayurveda and the modern medicine. Ayurvedic medicine is oriented towards prevention, health maintenance, and treatment. Ayurvedic system medicine believes that a disease is the product of an imbalance in the body and the mental elements that reduce the body's resistance to diseases. If the imbalance is corrected and the defense mechanisms are strengthened by herbal formulas, lifestyle changes, and diet, then the body will resist a disease with a goal of eliminating it. Herbal and herbo-mineral products used in Ayurveda are believed to strengthen the body's defense. Scientific evidence is gradually developing in support of the Ayurvedic concepts. The basic principle of allopathy or our modern medicine is it is primarily oriented towards the treatment of disease. Drugs are developed based on the concept that the elimination of specific causes of a disease, such as microorganisms, will cure a disease. This is the basic principle. The difference between Ayurveda and allopathy lies in the imbalance of the body and mind, and allopathy thinks that only the diseases are caused by the either microorganisms or the non-working of the particular part of the body. So some of the modern physicians in West as well as in India are trying to make a bridge among the two systems and derive benefits for the patients. In West, Ayurveda is branded as a complementary medicine. Scientific basis for Ayurvedic therapies by Lakshmi Chandra Mishra, published by CRC Academic Press, deals with different diseases and the Ayurvedic approach of these diseases. The diseases include cancer, heart disease, diabetes, etc. Another book by Dr. R.D. Lele, who was chairman of the Jaslok Hospital, he published a book on Ayurveda and modern medicine. It was published by Bharati Vidya Bhavan, discusses at length the link between two systems. Dr. M.S. Valiyathan made an extensive study between Ayurveda and biology, and he published a very good book on Ayurveda and biology, and he has actually brought out what is Charaka's legacy, Susruta's legacy, and Vagbhata's legacy. All these authors are well-known practicing medical doctors. Now a number of research papers are coming up adopting modern analytical techniques for Ayurvedic preparations and quality control. Because there was an argument that Ayurvedic medicines do not have quality control. Whereas now the Ayurvedic firms are also adopting the modern analytical techniques, and they are coming up with very good quality controlled medicines. And Professor R.H. Singh of Banaras University has contributed immensely on Ayurveda and modern science. Similarly, Professor Bhashan Bhattardhan of Pune, he is trying to correlate Ayurvedic concept with modern biology and computer science. Another area that is coming up is Ayur-informatics, which will be of immense use for future researchers and may lead to some noteworthy conclusions. Now I want to say a few concepts which were tested by modern methodologies. Dr. Bhanu Prakash of BHU Varanasi, in collaboration with Ayurveda department, he was a mechanical engineering department person, head of mechanical engineering. What he did is, he took the different puttas and what are the temperature characteristics of each putta, to what extent the temperatures go, and what is the temperature profiles. So all these things he has made a very thorough study, and then to which puta gives the maximum heat energy and what type of food dependency is required. So all those things he discussed at a very in detail. He has worked out. Similarly, Professor Balasubramanian from IIT Kanpur, he worked with all these iron pillars and he has come out with the cause for the purity of the iron pillars. Why the non-rusting character of the iron pillars, he has come out with very good suggestions. Similarly, the toxicity studies by using modern analytical techniques was done by Ayurveda University in Jaipur. They have studied the Haratala, which is a preparation of Rasamanikya, and they found that this Haratala is, in our chemistry terms, we call it as arsenic sulfide. This arsenic sulfide is supposed to be one of the most toxic elements. Arsenic is the most toxic substance. But when it was put to 60 putas from up to 56, 57, the toxicity remained with the arsenic toxicity remained with the Haratala, that substance. But after the 58, 59, 60, that became a non-toxic. So, and this is a very, very important finding because arsenic is supposed to be the highly toxic substance. When in the range of 59 to 60, what is happening to the atomic structure of that Haritala? That has to be pursued. So for that, they need a strong chemistry background, analytical techniques they have to use. So these type of things are coming up now one by one. And Dr. Narahari Shastri's database on shut infusion of RNA deals with RNA interactions, especially in the breast cancer. He has developed a lot of very good database on that. Similarly, assessment of Ayurvedic concept of cancer and new paradigm of anti-cancer treatment was discussed at length by Dr. R.H. Singh and Dr. Varadarajan in US. They are also doing a lot of work on these cancer treatment plans. Similarly, Dr. Agarwal in University of Texas, they are working on the biological aspects of how the plant products mentioned in Ayurveda works as a the reactants. Actually, what we call, there is a specific term for that biological term, how they interact. Similarly, Ayur-informatics is the welcome area to analyze in-depth the Ayurveda principles using information methods. Now, what I suggest for the modern scientists along with medical practitioners, a detailed database for the diseases, treatment procedures, and chemistry involved in these processes, materials used, and their chemistry during the process, comparing their pharmaceutical activity with modern drugs in terms of structure-activity relationships. See, why I put is, for last 60, 70 years, or we can say even up to 100 years, all the organic chemists, they do the chemistry of plants in a routine methodology. We are not seeing what is mentioned in our ancient scriptures. Unless we see the ancient scriptures, what is the procedures they adopted, and then how the extract or whatever is that, the process what they used, and then the activity. If we see those things in a proper way, then we may get a better chemistry for these Ayurvedic products. Because a simple example I can tell you, this for heart diseases, we call the one what is Guduchi. This Guduchi is supposed to be one of the best drug. But when the chemistry has been done, chemistry was done, the activity showed no activity was shown for that. But the way that Guduchi was treated and given to the patient, that procedure we have not adopted. So these procedures have to be clearly adopted, and those procedures are also should be made into a database, and the molecules in the plants or materials, they should be linked properly with the structure activity relationships. Then we will be able to get a better work. Why I am telling these things is, from CSIR in 1981 to 83, I was deputed to Germany to work in the computational chemistry. That was the initial or beginning days. I worked with Professor Gasteyer in those days, and then I could learn certain computational techniques, but my concentration was at that time was on spectroscopy, because I was looking after the spectroscopy department of the NIST. So I had to think more on the spectroscopy, not on the medicinal purposes. After I came back to Hyderabad, IICT, I had a very good interaction with Dr. Shastri, and we were continuously discussing these problems and how the computational science, modern computational sciences can deal with the drug problems given by or they discussed in the Ayurvedic text. These things have to be brought out. That's why recently I published one paper on the fundamental principles of Ayurveda. Because one very good book on fundamental principles of Ayurveda by K.N. Kannan, sorry. It has come, and I reviewed along with that. I wrote a very good article. It was published by Annals of Ayurveda, Annals of Ayurvedic Medicine. So like that, what we are trying to do, even at this after retirement, also I am trying to do a lot of medicinal books, and I have got now all the Ayurveda books with me, and I am trying to bring the medicinal plants, then metals, metallurgy, given by the Rasasastra books, and then try to correlate with the modern science, so that we can have a good results or some good discovery, good drug methodologies we may build up. So for that, what I see is the computational techniques are the most important one, and Dr. Shastri is doing a very good build-up. He is building up a very good computational chemistry systems in the country, because he built up a very good computational system in Hyderabad, and now he is doing in Jorhat also. So I wish that these things, when linked with all the modern as well as the ancient works, if we study thoroughly and then put it together and come out with new novel ideas, then we will become world leaders in the controlling the diseases like cancer, heart disease, and diabetes, etc. So I wish, by applying computational techniques, some of the most fundamental principles on drug action can also be discovered, and number of workers are working in this direction, both in medicinal chemistry laboratories as well as institutions, and some of the Ayurvedic institutions also. there should be a very good cooperation between the Ayurvedic institutions and the scientific institutions and bring out the basic concepts and put it in the medicinal chemistry. So with this, I thank all of you for patient hearing.
Thank you very much, sir, for your extraordinarily delivered lecture, taking us from the last 4,000 to 5,000 years to the modern science. And I just wanted to tell people that I know Suryanarayan Garu for more than 15 years, and he is one of the best analytical chemists and worked on a wide-ranging subjects when he is in RRL Jorhat, and probably he is involved in one of the topmost projects which have very high priority in petroleum chemistry and analytical chemistry, and in the spectroscopy, and many ideas of fundamental importance. And after retirement, he wrote more than 50 books. This is remarkable. And then he was a visiting professor in Sanskrit. That's another remarkable thing. And the third remarkable thing that has happened is he acted as a director for the Human Resource Development Center for Andhra Pradesh, where he was training a large number of Group 1, Group 2, Group 3 officers, including some IAS officers. And I had the fortune of visiting him when he was doing it and giving some lectures. And he could go through the problems, whether it is civil engineering or planning or building up a particular colony with equal rigor. Our Indian tradition shows that people are bestowed with multifaceted knowledge. It's not that super specializations were not there. The big schools of thoughts were there. And sir, I'm so happy that you have introduced this concept of lekhaks.
Yeah.
And also the schools of thoughts. You mentioned about Takshila University and Nalanda University, where in India for the first time, the system of working in a team, a larger team has come. And sir has also mentioned that it is not that one Vedavyasa who has written, it is the Vedavyasa school, wherein a large number of Sishyas were there. This Guru Sishya Parampara is a great asset, where the Takshila and Nalanda universities have shown the world the system of a university for the first time, before the world has woken up to the civilization. And I can keep on talking because I decided to not to speak, but I could not stop speaking. And this is a wonderful experience for all of us to not to be critical about simple things, but critical about the knowledge, about the reasoning, about the science. The Karna, the Vaisheshika Sutras, they're important, and many things are important, but we have to have a good knowledge in the language, whatever may be the language. It's not possible for us to be a master in English language, but it is necessary that we have to really be good in that language. It will be very difficult for me to understand if a native English speaker talks about Shakespeare and other, as much as I enjoy the slokas of Kalidasa or Bhavabhuti or my own local mother tongue. But at the same time, we will have to see how we can strengthen fundamentally to become a knowledge society. Then that is the way to go for the Atmanirbharata and become Vishwaguru. And the whole summer research training program is aimed to create a knowledge society. We are probably a little bit shamelessly aping the West. I'm not saying that we should not be taking good things from the West, but at what cost? In what ways? How do we do this? It's very important. We have to become self-reliant in what we are doing, and we should practice science at the highest levels of rigors. We don't have to worry about whether it is a modern science or whether it is a traditional science. Science is science. Mathematics is mathematics. A language is language. It's very poor that a country with 1.3 billion population with 800 universities are not able to find pure mathematicians to be recruited. We don't find. Whereas a country with 400 million population, there are a large number of pure mathematicians, which did not even exist 500 years before. So we have to concentrate on language and mathematics and chemical, physical, biological and other branches of science are also very important. Engineering and medicine are important. But what is more important is to become a very, very responsible citizens to achieve the Atmanirbharata. Sir, I really thank on behalf of everybody from the bottom of my heart, and I request some young people who are much more dynamic, the future generation, to take over. And Ilika, Lisa, Monty, Lisa, please take over the question answers. Monty is here and she has some questions, I think. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. The first question is from Mihir Joshi. Sir, in the modern era of science and technology, how Sanskrit will help us as ancient scientific knowledge to find out solutions of modern problems like pandemics and climate change?
Yes. I'll tell you simple this thing. What is a virus? How it comes? The pathogens, isn't it? In Sanskrit, if you see the old scriptures, they have classified the virus pathogens into 4 classes. The one which is from the mutraja, from the urine. The other one from the stool. Third one from the cough. Fourth one from the blood. The pathogens which have been generated by these 4, among them, the one which is from the sleshma or the kapha, that affects the heart. And the one with the details of that, if you go through the characteristics of the disease, in the Madhava Nidana, that is Nidana means diagnosis. It is an exclusively a book written for a diagnosis. There they have given very clearly these are the characteristics of the person who has got this disease affected by the virus generated by the cough and affecting the heart. So does that give you the modern ideas? They give the treatment also. But that treatment which they have mentioned earlier, will it be able to suit our generation? That we have to see. For that, we have to understand what was given in that. For that, you have to study. Without studying, we cannot do anything. Simply talking will not work. Read that books, read the scriptures. Take out those portions. try to interpret in modern terms, then say whether it is working or not. You followed? This is what is required. Simply saying will not work. You have to go through the book, scriptures, see what is written in that. Whether that can be adopted to this time or not, that we have to see. I'll tell you another simple example. I myself has worked out one metal which absorbs all the sounds. To decode that sloka, it took me 2 years. For one word, I had to struggle for 2 years. After that, we did that work and we found that is exactly what is acting as a sound absorbing material. So unless we study, we go through and then see whether that can be adopted. You have to experiment it and then see that whether we can do or not. Only after studying thoroughly and understanding it, then put it in the practice. This is how it has to be done. Okay? I think it is satisfied you. Hello? Something missing. Ekkada poyindadi? Hello? Hello? This is వస్తున్నది కట్ అయింది. Just wait and just see. Suddenly got cut. Okay. Mute your mic. You are live, but your mic is muted. Okay. Hello? ఒకసారి మన పిల్లు ఎందుకు సడన్ గా పోయింది ఇది ఎక్కడ పెట్టాలా ఇది వచ్చింది వచ్చింది అనుకుంటా ప్రెజెంటేషన్ అయిపోయింది క్వశ్చన్ ఆన్సర్స్ అవుతోంది
So there are some internet issues. We are back online. Microphone. So you have to unmute your microphone.
Yeah, okay now?
Yes.
I'm not able to hear.
Monty, ask us.
Sir, the next question is from Akanksha Sharma. Do Ayurvedic medicines need modern scientific scrutiny and validation?
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Especially the quality control is very, very important. Quality control is very, very important because not only in here, in even West, they say the most of the Ayurvedic medicines, they contain lead. Because in the process, we do not know how they are doing it. So the quality control is very, very much essential for oil. But now I think Dabur and other people, the famous Ayurvedic companies, they are doing the quality control. They are adopting modern analytical techniques and then doing all the quality controls.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Ambarish. Sir, he wants to ask you related to computer coding. He says that he got an article which says Sanskrit is the only language which will be used in future to send signals to space and also for computer coding. So is it true?
Yes, because now actually in the West as well as in India, people are now working on the Ashtadhyayi. You see, Panini's Ashtadhyayi is the most structured one in Sanskrit. So that they are adopting for developing new computer languages.
Sir, the next question is from Aritra. Did ancient Indians belonging to Vedic era have concepts of semiconductor?
Yeah, there is one actually, this Agastya Samhita, it discusses about the batteries and then the actually the electricity generation and all that. But only thing is they produce the electricity in the cell. There they used actually the copper sulfate. It was mentioned as Mayura Kantha actually. See, Mayura Kantha means that is the color of copper sulfate is exactly the peacock's neck. So that word is used in Augustus because you know most of our ancient scriptures, they talk only in terms of the words which are related to the particular substance, either by color or by its hardness and all those things. So to code that, I'll tell you simple one example. I was talking about that metal, you know. There it was mentioned Sukatundam. Sukatundam means it is a parrot's beak. But that is not the one. It is a kind of mercury. So to study that, to understand that word, what does it belong, for what it is used, you have to code. For coding that, you have to understand, you have to go through a lot of books. Unless we thoroughly study or thoroughly screen the books, scriptures, we will not be able to say this is this, this is that. So once we study all those things, then we think definitely will be. That's what now they are doing actually. The University of Hyderabad, they are already working on that. They generating computer logic with the Panini's Ashtadhyayi. The Sanskrit department of University of Hyderabad, they are working on that. Similarly, linguistics department of University of Hyderabad, they are also working on that. They are generating for the languages a computer coding. The actual, what is that called? Machine language, they are doing it for the languages. Any other thing? Okay.
Yes, sir. There are a lot of questions, sir.
Yeah.
And they are finding your talk to be a very illuminating, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And sir, I would like to ask you a few more questions if you permit us so. Next question is from Namrata Tiwari. She says, Vedic knowledge is far more deeper than we know. To which extent this knowledge can be used now, years after, and with advancement of technology, and can be used in research in the 21st century?
Yes, definitely. Only thing is a perseverance is very much essential, and we have to understand the subject. We have to, for that we require a very good Sanskrit knowledge also. Not only science. See, the thing is, people with science, they forget about language. Because we are thinking of only specialization. other parts we are losing. So it requires a combination of approach, an approach requiring for both linguistics plus your modern technology.
Sir, the next question is from Mihir Joshi. How can we use ancient scientific literature to answer questions of quantum mechanics and modern medical science?
Yeah, actually quantum, the Kanada's Vaiseshika Sutras and even the philosophy. I had two, three books have come. 2-3 books have come exactly on this. What the quantum mechanics and the philosophical approach, how they link together. So yes, the one very famous book, I forgot the name actually. I can tell you after, because it is in my computer, those things. What they did is they tried to isolate the mind and then the actions of the body. And he tried to correlate that with the quantum mechanics. I have a lot of papers on that also. I can, if that person is interested, let him write to me. I can send all the details also. I have a lot of books. There are 2-3 books on that actually. How the Indian philosophy and quantum mechanics can be correlated.
Sir, there are a lot of questions. We are compiling them all, and in general, we'll ask you a question. Right. What's your opinion for including these Shastra and Vedas in our primary education system?
In primary education, I think it is difficult because the level of understanding is a little bit difficult. But I think in high school level, we should start from the high school level. Not as Shastras, you see, it is also a science. We have to put it in the form of science. The way you are putting science, basic principles, like that you have to say, suppose atomic theory we are teaching. You put there whatever the person who has given atomic structure, we talk of only Bohr atom. But what Kanada's contribution, we have to mention it. So I have put all those slokas, what he has given clearly. So these type of things, what was discussed in those scriptures, they should be brought out. They should put it in the curriculum. Simply they mentioned one line, Kanada was the propounder of atomic theory. That's all. But what he has done? What are the details he has worked out? He has given the action. What are the principles of action? How effect comes from the action to the effect. All these things have to be discussed. The problem is we are not able to decipher. The people who can teach also are very, very few. That is the main basic problem. Very few professors in Sanskrit are able to understand what is science. They see Sanskrit means they think only literature, but they don't see this direction. That has to be brought out.
Thank you, sir. Sir, we are really enlightened to hear your lecture.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's really very inspiring for us, and we have various comments for you, sir. Brilliant talk, profound ancient information, which makes us proud as Indians. Yes. And sir, there are a lot more. Everyone that were a part of this talk, they are really enlightened after hearing you, sir. Now I would request our director, sir, to kindly give the vote of thanks for today's session.
Thank you, Monty. and all our team. And we have to just say thank you, dhanyawad.
Yes,
And
dhanyawad. Namaskar.
Namaskar and dhanyawad. And after all this wonderful talk, it's better to just thank you from the bottom of our heart to make all of us feel proud that we belong to this great land. And more importantly, we should not stop by just enjoying our old glory.
Yes.
The future is ahead.
Yes.
And the COVID has given a call for us to take a stock of situation. And then, sir, with your inspiration and the need of the hour, we will try our best to become more knowledgeable. I think that's the only thing that we can do in whatever area that we are working on, without really worrying so much about the success, failure, or reaching the target. We will try to choose a path of knowledge where the scientific temper will be at the forefront to run us. And again, on behalf of all summer research training program students and my own staff at CSIR NEAST, maybe I should say that your own staff, because you also belong to this, we thank you. And really, it is a wonderful day for us to listen to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.